Right across the east. There's two blocks. Here, so they're ready to come.
Hey.
Annual meeting with board of congregation, the planning water. Hey, John.
Hello.
First time I get to use the house. You'll go take the gavel with. Your honor. I give an introduction, it doesn't work. You wanna go around the room, or do you want to take a roll call? Go around the road. Thank you. Brian, start.
Brian Gold, Senior Planner at CVRPC. Ruben McLaren, Senior Transport Planner at CVRPC.
Anita Brown, yes, William.
John Brown, Middlesex. Ethan Turner, Williamstown.
Dave Stapleton, Porter.
House.
Oh, Emery Plainfield.
Christian Meyer, I'll mention real quickly, there's restrooms through that door on the floor, otherwise there's another one downstairs. And let us know about if you're having difficulty hearing, we can try to turn fans off or on, especially once we get to the one presentation. It's it.
You're kind of Washington. Jerry, you meet all the rocks. Page, the patio on.
So Robert Mike, roll in. Doesn't receive one right.
Nancy Sharp, CVRPC.
Phil Shakey, Gary John, alternate, that was me.
I'm supposed to see the middle there, alternate.
Why was the label Markfield?
The Larry Worcester.
Mike Miller, Montpelier.
Jen Shabby, Berry City. Rest of staff.
Nikki Sato, CVRPC ladies and leads.
Jenny Williamson, CVRPC, Planning Commission.
I'm gonna go to CVRPC manifest.
We're gonna get everybody to you on this.
And online, starting with Dawn.
Waitsfield. Don Lay.
Alice Peel, Waitsfield.
David, the next. Muted, David.
Oh, I see the name of them. That matching up to the name.
Are you hear us, David?
David went from somewhere.
From Duxbury. Yep.
All right, so we were, and James
James Crafts, Warren, Vermont.
and Renee. Renee, come on.
There we go. Renee Carpenter, East Montpelier.
Thank you, and Andre and Derek will introduce themselves in a bit, they're gonna be presenting as part of the Brownfield House.
Thank you, welcome everyone. Any adjustments to the agenda? The, I'm here, none, move on to any public comment. The meeting is from the public. We're getting didn't hear or see much, okay. First, we're on the agenda, the election results, Jan. Don't say.
Sure. Want to thank everybody who returned their ballots. Nancy and I counted 17 ballots. And everybody who could be voted for got voted for. So it was it's less than 5 minutes to count. So I don't know how to say other than you all voted for who was on the ballot sheet. So
Thank you for volunteering them.
Yes, so big house wasn't written in this year.
There was no undervotes, no overvotes. And a big thank you to Nancy, who always keeps us in line and gets this done, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us in.
Next item is the brownfield presentation, Andrea and Derek.
Carol, kick it off real quick and give you guys a chance to set the stage a little bit. Basically, high level headline, you got $2.2 million for brownfields assessment and a revolving loan fund to be used for cleanup. It's 1.2 million for that coalition assessment money and another $1 million for the revolving loan fund. Tonight, we're going to be asking you all for approval to create the revolving loan fund. I know from our conversation in December, there were some outstanding questions. We tried to address some of those in the memo. We also have Derek and Andrea on, they'll introduce themselves in a second. But I just want to give Eli a chance to introduce the need for this program and why, what was the impetus for the application to start with.
Hi, everyone. So I'm so glad we got these awards. We are seeing more and more need for brownfields, really all over our region, especially in our cities where, you know, this history of industrial use. We have used the funds that are available to us through the assessment funds. We have expended those for the time that I've been here for 2 years. 3 rounds of those, we expended all of those, and there's still much need for brownfields redevelopment, and that redevelopment includes for, you know, a lot of it will be some of these projects will be green space, some of it will be redevelopment for housing. Those are the 2 big uses that we're seeing for the projects that this. And then the need for cleanup is way more than that assessment. So there's really not a lot out there for cleanup. So this is revolving fund gives us the opportunity to also fund cleanup for projects out of the assessment. So.
And with that, we'll figure out you, Derek and Andrea.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm Andrea Peterson. Great. I'm Andrea Peterson with Montrose Environmental, and Montrose was selected to assist the Central Vermont RPC last fall with applying for these funds and assisting with implementation. Derek, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself next.
Hi, I'm Derek Street, also with Montrose, and work a lot with Andrea on a variety of projects. I formerly worked at EPA, actually, up until May of this year, before one of Andrea's co-workers, who had enticed me away from a job in the past, brought me to Montrose.
So a little background on Rose will be our qualified environmental consultant and bring a suite of technical skills that we don't necessarily have in-house and ensure that the program and projects meet EPA guidelines. You guys have any other specifics, or did you want to get right into questions?
We can get right into questions. It's a little bit difficult to hear.
You always repeat questions by the microphone.
Questions, how much fund initially funded with PAT, and 2, when the loans are issued, are they free or they're paying? Well,
You guys guess that? I'm gonna repeat it. 2 questions. The first one, what level is the fund initially funded at? And the second question is, are the loans interest-bearing loans?
So with the RLF, it's initially capitalized at $1 million by EPA, which is the highest amount the award can be awarded at statutorily. Interest rates are variable and are up to the grantee to determine. So it could be anything from 0% to whatever you ultimately decide you want to set it at as a program.
Sure. So we can set the interest rates affiliated with any loan. We intend, as laid out in the memo, we intend to work with a bank and underwriter for both loan underwriting, risk assessment, and also for servicing. So I think we would try to work with them to figure out what's an appropriate level of interest depending on risk. Further, we can still come in below market rate. You know, if these are projects for the public good, that's okay too.
Are there other requirements that, grantees will need to meet, that are specified in our grant, or are those things you can determine?
The recipient of the loan or sub-grant? Yeah, that's a good point. It is for loans, but it can also be used for sub-grants. Obviously, you don't get paid back with the sub-grant, and that can only be up to 50% of the value. So
matching funds or.
Yeah, so the question was, are there any additional requirements placed on the loan recipient or grantee, such as matching funds, et cetera?
Will the
yeah.
grantees be, can it be private grantees as well as municipal?
And follow-up question is, would the grantees be private or municipal?
So once the grant's been awarded and you get the cooperative agreement, you can do loans to basically anyone. It doesn't matter if it's a for-profit, it's an individual, anyone is fine. You can only do sub-grants to other governmental entities. So anything from the state down to a regional organization, county, city, or a 501c3 nonprofit, a 501c4 if it doesn't lobby, and there's a few other very nuanced cases. All of the terms and conditions of your grant essentially flow down to any subawards when you do a loan or a sub-grant. The only thing that doesn't flow down is on a loan, they don't have to do federal procurement to that level. They can just hire whoever they want. The big things that typically come down to on the loans, though, and the sub-grants are compliance with Davis-Bacon Act on prevailing wages, or you would implement the state of Vermont's prevailing wages on a project, whichever are higher. Then there's other things you have to deal with, like historic preservation, Endangered Species Act. There's a whole list of federal cross-cutters, but that's why people like Andrea and I are here. And when I was at EPA most recently, one of the big projects I worked on was with headquarters on revising the internal RLF program manual. So I still have all the policy and statutes fresh in my head.
What is a qualified ground site?
So the question was, who will determine what is a qualified brownfield site? And I'm going to answer part of that off right away. We already have the Brownfields Committee, which will serve as our Brownfields Advisory Committee under the language of the grants. So that's part of it. Their review and consideration of what a valid and good project for the region is going to be. Are there other specifics, Andrea and Derek, that we would be considering regularly?
So ultimately, EPA is the one who decides if a site is eligible for funding or not, but we can pretty much figure out upfront if they are going to approve or deny a site based on the guidelines. Trying to think if there was anything else specific to that. Generally, you know, you can't be responsible for the contamination at the site. There can't be like a consent order from the state or the federal government against you. Typically, a lot of the people who go into this program also go through their state's voluntary cleanup program, which in Vermont would be BRELA.
David?
I think Alice was first, but
Oh,
go on, Alice.
yeah, I think I'm getting it. I'm just trying to understand the process here. So what would happen is, and Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be up to CVRPC to to communicate that this money is available for loans or grants. And then whoever identifies a project would come to CVRPC for an application, which would then be reviewed by the Brownsfield Committee and Derek and Andrea. And is there a maximum amount that would be awarded either in a loan or a grant, sub-grant of some kind? You know, I'm just trying to see, how do you get in the door to say, I think I have a brownfield area that needs to be cleaned up before we do something, or just the fact that it's a brownfield and needs cleaning up so it's not an environmental hazard?
Part of that would be a policy decision on the part of Central Vermont RPC in terms of how much of the money do you want to subgrant out versus give out in terms of loans. EPA prefers loans because the idea of the program is to revolve the money. Even if you do it at 0% interest, you're still putting the money out there and it's still coming back and you're still getting sites cleaned up, which is the goal of the program. So those would be some of the policy decisions the RPC would need to make on the front end. And I believe Region 2 likes for you to put together a policy manual first before you go out and making loans and subgrants. So that way it's a level playing field. Everybody can see the rules and understand what you're doing and what the restrictions are.
Okay, so in other words, a client could come in and say they would have an idea on how much they would need in a loan. They would apply for that amount, you know, with a kind of a pre-study saying, here's the problem, here's what we feel or have determined it will take to clean it up properly. And then they can just come in and apply for any amount based on that.
Right. Up to the ceiling of $1 million that the RPC has in the award.
Yeah, can I have all of it, please?
But yes, typically there's a public component piece of this as well, where you have to do something called an analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives, where you write out what the issue is at the site. Typically, there's 3 alternatives for how to address the site, and there's a recommended alternative, and then the public has a chance to review that document and provide comments, and then those comments can be factored into decisions about how the site is cleaned up.
Yeah. Okay, I kind of like that. Okay.
Yes, and that has a required 30-day public comment period as a part of that. But yeah, if the RPC wanted to, they could loan all $1 million in one loan out the door. There's no limit on the amount for a loan. Subgrants are limited to $500,000, which is a significant chunk of your RLF. But as you spend the money, there's a non-competitive process for a revolving loan fund to get more money from EPA that's added to the grant.
Okay, would CVRPC actually have the money in a bank account, or is that they are given, you can You have to
It's
like they do with all federal appropriations.
yeah, it's held in an account in a system called ASAP. Um,
Mm,
and as expenses are incurred is when you would draw the money down.
got it.
Once the money revolves, though, the RPC holds it in an account, and interest can accrue on that money, and then that can also be used to fund the revolving loan fund program.
Okay.
I should have added, Montrose, that is Andrea and Derek are also working with NVDA, Northeast Vermont Development Association. So they're familiar with also what it's like working with an RPC in Vermont and some of our constraints.
Mm-hmm.
Gives them a little further background.
David?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, but actually a few questions. One, following up on that last point in terms of the money being obligated and held in an account. Have any of these programs had difficulty drawing down the money or getting the money dispersed that's been obligated given the current situation with the federal government? I know in other federal programs, we've had difficulty with obligated funding being paid out and there being a lot of barriers or not following through on the obligations. So maybe I'll stop there and then ask my other question.
So earlier this year, when the new administration came into office, there was a freeze across all grants federal wide, and there wasn't very much notice put out in terms of those, and that the funding was frozen in ASAP for everyone, and then it was unfrozen. Brownfield specifically, I don't know of anyone nationwide that's had an issue with making drawdowns as opposed to some of the other programs.
Okay. From the EPA.
Yes, correct, from the EPA, whereas, you know, some of the other EPA programs were unfortunately terminated and grants rescinded.
And then my other question is, in the note, it mentioned that the administrative costs for administering the program and setting it up for CVRPC and Montrose, and then the per loan kind of administration, oversight and support, technical assistance that's provided can be drawn down from the funds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if there's been any projections of what those costs are, and if those kinds of costs are things that could be covered with whatever the set interest rate is, or if that'll gradually kind of just diminish the funding, and if how those projections can be kind of developed to understand like what those costs are, both per grant and then per year for administration.
Mm-hmm. To some degree, EPA expects you to diminish the funding, which is why they provide supplemental funding every year, which the solicitation usually comes out for in February and is due a month or two later. Lately, there's been 3 tiers of that supplemental funding, but after this next cycle of the bipartisan infrastructure law, assuming all that funding remains intact for brownfields, that'll go away. So there won't be any multi-million-dollar infusions of supplemental funding in the future like there have been over the last 5 years. But pre-bill, typically, man, you guys are in a region with a lot of RLFs. You know, you could probably expect to see anywhere between $300,000 to $500,000 more a year, as long as you're obligating the money. And that would be in perpetuity, because the loan, the grant's initially for 5 years. It can be extended for up to 15.
Okay. And do you have like kind of rules of thumb in terms of per loan costs associated with the kind of oversight and assistance that's provided?
It's very project specific in what it entails. something like an asbestos abatement in a relatively small buildings, much easier to do oversight on and document than say very large cleanup, maybe at a dry cleaner that's got a plume that's impacted multiple parcels.
Is there a maximum amount cap for individual loans?
No, there is, well, it's up to the limit of our grant, so he just mentioned it. That we could do one loan for $1 million with a 40-year payback period. We don't want to do that, but that is one possibility. For the sub grants, we are capped at $500,000.
Any other questions about? Go ahead, Paul.
So the Brownfields Committee, I assume, had standing accounts or requests to with this new infusion of money. There's probably a balance already. You have an infusion of money. You have more projects. Do the existing projects start at the top? Like are the projects that have been trying to get, I don't know if there are, but if there are projects that have been trying to get funded, are they at the top of the heap? Does that make sense?
I would say the Brownfields Committee should probably think about it. The question was, are those projects that we're already working on internally through our state assessment funding, should they be at the top of the list? And the response is, I think that's a conversation for the Brownfields Committee, whether you want to do a solicitation and try to get a bunch of projects and compare apples to apples and pick the best, shiniest ones, or if you want to keep working with the existing projects and those opportunities.
And I just add that as a part of our application, part of Montrose's CVRPC, there's a number of sites that were identified through that application, and those sites are ones that we also work with through the Brownfields Advisory Committee. So those were, I don't know what the selection process is going to look like, but they would most likely be prioritized. And
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about the ones we included to show our need. So the work that the Brownfields Committee has been doing throughout the last few years really has led a trail of crumbs to show the need for this that the EPA recognized.
Yeah.
Questions, do we have to do resolution first and then vote on that?
Read the resolution, you mean?
Yeah.
I think we could read the resolution into the record.
And then we'll have motion.
Motion to accept the resolution or adopt the resolution.
Usually we need 16 to pass, correct?
Yep.
We have, how many members of it are? Now,
We have at least 16.
okay, this is a resolution 2025 that go to the establishment of brownfield revolving loan fund. Whereas the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission has been awarded $1 billion under the Environmental Protection Agency's fiscal year 2025 individual revolving loan fund program for the purpose of supporting brownfield cleanup and redevelopment projects throughout through loans and subdivisions. And whereas 24 VSA 4345 grant 16 grant being authorized regional planning decision borrowing money encourage that indebtedness for the purposes of purchasing leasing property for office space, establishing administrative a revolving loan fund for establishing a line of credit, and one, no obligation incurred into the subdivision shall encumber the grand list of any property of a member municipality. And in the case of a purchase, any collateral pledge shall be limited to the property being purchased. It shall not exceed the fair market value of that property. And whereas section 74 of the Regional Planning Commission bylaws likewise authorizes CVRPC to borrow money and incur indebtedness for the purposes described in the statute, including establishing and administering a revolving loan. If approved by 2/3 of the Vote of the board. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Commissioners of the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission that one, CVRPC is hereby authorized to establish and administer the revolving loan fund. Using paid dollars granted awarded by U.S. Environmental Protection Agency under FY 25 revolving loan fund program. To any obligation by the Regional Planning Commission shall comply with the requirements set forth in 24 BSA section 2345, 16 20, ready, I-I. After my previous voted for the Board of Commissioners that the duly fund meeting of the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission for 10th day of June 2020. I will make the motion, we accept and we pass the resolution. Second. David, second. Motion on the floor is seconded. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Excellent. Good luck. You are. Absolutely. It sounds like you're doing a good job of dividing a program with a kind of. And then move forward. It's also helps with the government. And more hand. Next item is the regional land use. Maps. Who's on it? Well, me.
You won't see my, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Andrew and Garrett.
I apologize.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's very helpful. Certainly, that's why we're so happy with our selection, our procurement. You're welcome to stick around and hear about our future land use map or go take care of your families, whatever rises to the top.
Well,
Thank
I've
you.
got a 3-year-old I need to go help my wife with. So it was great meeting you all and talking with you all tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, look for me, yeah, all right. So hi, everyone, it's me again, I'm back 2 months later with a little bit of progress to report, so. Want to talk again just about the status of the future land use map. I'm not gonna go through the whole background like I did the last time in April for folks that missed that meeting or heaven forbid forgot what a future land use map is all about. You can look at the meeting packet from the April 8th, 2025 Board of Commissioners meeting, and there's a lot more content in there. But just as a quick reminder, with the future land use map, municipalities will have the option to pursue a Tier 1A or Tier 1B status. The Land Use Review Board will designate the boundaries for the Tier 3 status, so that's really supposed to be areas for critical natural resources. And the easiest way to describe it is if you're not Tier 1 and you're not Tier 3, you're Tier 2. It's basically the status quo of sorts. Now, we've got a handful of different future land use area categories. The most densely populated of those will be the centers and the neighborhoods. So the downtown and village centers and the planned growth areas and village areas in the neighborhood. Then we've got a bunch of different classes that are sort of in the middle there. And this list from the top left to the bottom right sort of is decreasing in density. So enterprise areas, transition infill, resource-based recreation, hamlets, and then the rural designation. So it's likely that we will see a lot of rural residential, rural ag and forestry, and as we've talked in the regional plan committee, a decent amount of the rural conservation areas as well. I noted these process considerations the last time. I just put this in here for folks that maybe don't want to go back to the April 8th version, but a number of different process considerations throughout the development of this map. The most important of these downtown and village centers, land growth areas, and village areas are really intended to accommodate a substantial portion of the housing targets that will be allocated for each of the municipalities. So VAPA produced a methodology. I think we're on version 3 of the methodology at this point, and it really was to establish a consistent statewide framework so that all of the regional planning commissions are using the same classes. Those classes all are defined in the same way, and that at least initially that end product will yield a suite of maps that are consistent on a statewide basis. Now, we apply this methodology to get to that first step, right? So we have this draft map, and once that draft map is complete, then that's when we take it out on the road and we meet with municipalities on a, one at a time, or if possible, maybe even a few at a time, and talk about the interim results, talk about the housing target allocations, and then hear feedback from the municipalities and make modifications to the map as necessary. So the last time I was here, I talked a lot about those rural categories. So the rural residential, rural ag and forestry, and rural conservation. This time around, I'm at the other end of the spectrum and really focusing on our downtown centers, our village centers, etc. So with the rural classes, it's not that there's not a lot of data to juggle, because there's quite a lot of data to juggle, but with these denser categories, more densely settled categories, it does get quite complicated, because you're considering even more factors. I was trying to come up with a Rubik's Cube analogy, and I'm not sure if I'm starting with the Rubik's Cube solved and then I'm putting colors on every side, or if I'm just giving up and breaking the Rubik's Cube apart and laying it out in 2 dimensions. But in any case, it's about as frustrating of an exercise as you can get. So we're looking at Waitsfield here in this first example. Over on the left-hand side, we've got the state designations. So in pink, that is the village center, and in yellow, that's the neighborhood development area. And the blue outline is the extent of the water service area for the town. Over on the right-hand side, we're looking at the zoning map or at least the zoning categories within that water service area. And we've got the village center, and then the darker orange is the Irisville commercial district. And so when we combine all of those different pieces of information, we end up with something, at least preliminarily, that looks like this, where the dark purple is the village center, and that roughly parallels the existing village center designation, so that the town is already enrolled in. And then everything you see around it in pink is what designated as a village area. Now you'll note a couple of things about this. Up in the top corner, the blue line extends beyond the pink, maybe a little bit difficult to see. The reason for that is the zoning changes at that point, and it's less suitable for designation as a village area, and it's more likely to fall into the rural residential. One thing that's not on this map, but is worth mentioning, the little blob that sticks out on the left-hand side of the map there, that actually crosses a municipal boundary, and that goes into Facein. So for those of you that know where the big picture theater is, Carroll Road, the water service area actually continues up Carroll Road for a stretch, and as a result, it seems like a good fit for inclusion in the village area. And on top of that, Facein's zoning indicates as much. Basically, it's association with that commercial activity in the heart of Waitsfield. So that's the simpler of the two examples. For even more fun, let's move into Berry City. Janet, I'm looking at you. So map on the left, the yellow blob at the center is the designated downtown, and the blue boundary around the outside is a quarter-mile buffer around said designated downtown. Over on the right-hand side, if you maybe squint real hard, you'll see a blue boundary. That is that same downtown designation. And the rest of this jumble of colors is the zoning for the city. And we move forward one more here. The blobs that we see on the left-hand side represent the sewer service and water service areas. So again, just going back, we've got our state designation and that buffered area around the state designation on the left. Got a number of different zoning categories included within that buffered region over on the right. We've got our water and sewer service areas over on the left, again with that downtown designation in the center. And then over on the right-hand side is really a first cut at what the downtown center and planned growth area might look like for Berry City. And again, I'll note now, if I didn't note before, that a lot of this work is still very preliminary. There are multiple different assessments that need to be made. I'm taking sort of a first pass with the available data. The next step is really to confirm in the zoning bylaws that the different zoning districts that fall within these areas actually meet the criteria so that they can be included. So there's a chance that in some areas we'll see these designations shrink. And in many areas, I would expect to see these designations increase as we dig further into the underlying zoning data to see what is and isn't allowed within the various classes. So what's next? We're looking to have a complete draft map in early July. We need to continue to review our stakeholder survey results. Just as a quick aside, we did run a stakeholder survey. We had about 120-ish responses. So we'll be incorporating those results into the map. There's still plenty of gaps. There's draft maps on the wall. I'm happy to make a digital copy available to folks as well. So everywhere that you see on these maps on the wall that are gray, those are areas that are still remaining to be addressed. In all likelihood, those will be filled out with the one of the three rural categories, again, the rural residential, rural ag and forestry, or rural conservation. And we'll continue to coordinate our work with the regional planning committee. I mentioned before that once the draft map is ready, that we intend to meet with every municipality. Ideally, we would be meeting with your select board or city council, whichever you may have, as well as your planning commission, other boards and commissions that might want to weigh in on this mapping effort, so conservation commissions or others, really to try to get everyone that's going to have input on the municipal version of a map into a room, have that dialogue so that we can come away with that with concrete ideas on the changes that the municipality would like to see, and then we balance those against the statutory requirements of the future land use map. We'll then have a revised draft map ready to go. So a revision from this July map. We'll incorporate that municipal feedback and continue to coordinate with the regional plan committee. And then looking to submit a map and plan to the land use review board sometime towards the end of the year. We had originally planned to take a bit more aggressive schedule, and as luck for me would have it, the land use review board's agenda is fastly filling up. So December, January timeframe is what we negotiated at our last meeting. How can you help, you might ask? Well, we would love to have some help coordinating the meetings with select boards and planning commissions, would certainly appreciate if you could get in front of your select board or city council and make them aware of, the work that's ongoing, so that they're not, completely caught off guard if we do try to schedule a meeting with them. And then the other piece is really just to start that conversation, if you haven't already, about, tier 1A and tier 1B status. And, I'm happy to help with that, and can also bring in the rest of the land use planning team here to have those conversations with municipal staff or select board members, whoever it might be. Noting that for tier 1B, the municipality indicates that they would like to have tier 1B status for certain areas of their town, and they will confirm that they have the in-house capacity to conduct the level of oversight that would be required to act on those Act 250 relaxed Act 250 regulations. The tier 1A, and I am guessing that affects just really a small handful of our municipalities here. Tier 1A will be a formal application process. The Land Use Review Board is putting that application together, and I believe they'll be issuing that opportunity sometime in January of next year. So with that, happy to take any questions or feedback that anyone has at this point.
Right. The land use review board, is that, I mean, the regional planning commission?
No,
They're a state.
the Land Use Review Board is a state entity, and they've essentially taken over the Act 250 jurisdiction, so they also will be the body that reviews the regional plan when we submit it. And the future land use map is a part of the regional plan.
You has to get approved prior to submitting the regional plan. So the process, so the first, for those familiar with the Natural Resource Board, regain land use survey. That's it. It's not very long. Second, we will submit our plan for review with the Land Use Review Board. The process will be this commission, this board of commissioners, will first get a preliminary approval to submit. We will then submit, they will review and say, yeah, it meets all state statutes. We're ready, you know, you're good to approve this plan. We can approve the plan finally, after a 60-day, public comment period, and then resubmit it again as a. Very fine. You want to open it up to?
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Lee?
Yes, Brian, tier 3 communities. There's a tier 3 designation, didn't apply to the entire town, or do we?
No, so for those of you online, the question was about tier 3 communities and whether that tier 3 designation applies to the entire town. The tier 3 areas are just going to be polygons in the state that are set aside to designate the highest quality or highest value natural resources. So the tier 3 designation only falls within those polygons that are established by the board. And it is unlikely that a tier 3 polygon would cover an entire municipality.
Yeah, just like, I think, can you include this map, send it out to all the commissioners?
Yes.
This use map?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was when you got, and then when the July one comes out, you follow up on that, because the board will probably need.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that, Peter, and I know this won't be necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but once we have the July. The draft ready by early July, I was also planning to make an online version, so for those of you that are interested or able or willing to interact with an online map, you'll have that option as well, but yes, we can make sure to include that.
I wanted it because it's gonna take some real preparation with my select board plan.
And we can help with that materials, presentations, whatever it needs, but there's a certain amount of education that just needs to happen about this process. It's taken, we've had a year to work on it. We don't expect them just to plan commission to so important thing. They didn't say them today. Any other comments?
Yeah, it is, right.
Oh, there's one design that varies from that factor looking for.
I love it. Have a great night. That's what I'm hoping for. What I'm expecting is a lot of, well, why is this way? Why isn't it that way? And to the extent that we can have that conversation without going down the statute rabbit hole, we will. And there are going to be things about municipalities that I just don't know. That folks will make their case and they'll say, yeah, you know what, that does seem to fit into this higher density category or lower density category. We'll make the changes.
And so that's a really more interesting part of the conversation, just from experience talking to other regions. I know one RPC showed up, said, hey, this is our village area. And the local law would say, well, that parcel there is conserved, so we might want to take that out, it's just no building. So it's getting that local insight in addition to integrating local planning. Yeah, we're working with a lot of different data sets. These data have limitations, maybe be chief among them, but folks are gonna know more about their municipality than I do. And so where there are potentially errors in the data, where there is a different interpretation of what the zoning bylaws suggest, the sort of municipal intent piece, communicating that can affect the boundary set. Doug.
I'm sorry. You finished that?
Here, how you can help section, 2 questions. You're asking us to help coordinate with to get the select board planning commission ideally to the same group at the same time. Do are you starting in August or right now?
Oh, yeah, they're making.
Well, we're actually meeting with Berlin in June, end of June. So that's our first meeting.
Yeah, so really, yeah.
ASAP, yes.
Okay.
Start as soon as.
Okay.
Yeah, even, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, even if it's just, hey, select board chair, someone from CVRPC, Brian or Nikki, most likely are gonna be reaching out to you about the future land use map and a desire to come in and have a little time on a select board agenda. Just don't mind to be caught off guard. Even something like that.
Okay.
I think helpful.
And so this is a little on the sly side, but do you really want other committees present? I think maybe you said that, or did you say it?
I said it, I do.
Okay.
Meeting's being recorded, so I will be as diplomatic as possible. It might not make the meeting easier, but hopefully it will make the product better.
Okay.
You guys follow?
Yes.
Was that my name? I'm trying, sometimes it's not easy to hear, but
Yeah.
what I do want to say that the Land Use Review Board is going through their process of defining Tier 3. And it's the Land Use Review Board that is going to define Tier 3. And they had a public hearing, and I think they will have other public hearings, but they had a public hearing in Essex that Brian notified us all about. And I love, I have no life, there was nothing on TV, so I went to the public hearing. And so did Doug Greason from Waterbury. We were both there. And we came away concerned with what we were hearing from the Land Use Review Board. And we have already begun discussion of this on the Regional Plan Committee. The chair of the Land Use Review Board, who's a former planning commissioner from Heinsberg, gave an overall presentation and then opened the floor to questions. And my first question was, okay, in defining this Tier 3, there are many municipalities, and I was thinking about Waitsfield in particular, and Brian will remember how much work we did on our own land use, our future land use map, and our natural resources and natural habitat connectors. And we defined critical forest blocks in that for our new town plan. So I asked the Land Use Review Board, okay, so are you going to look at what is completed by the regional plan in the new regional plan future land use mapping? And what about municipalities that have already done a lot of work on this for defining tier 3? And the answer was no. They are not going to consider either municipal town plans or regional plans. And that kind of really stunned me. The way it was put was, we're the ones that have the authority to define tier 3. And we'd like to read a couple of municipal plans, but we can't read them all to make decisions here. And they also have what they said we're also going by what A&R thinks are the definitions for criteria that they want us to consider. But the point of tier 3 for the Land Use Review Board is to look for areas of development that can happen in forest areas, maybe even in conserved areas, that they're looking for places where development can happen. It's the housing issue bumping into protected lands, and they'll make the decisions on that. And not just myself, but there were farmers there that are worried about protecting their agricultural lands and for farming. And there were other concerns there. And I'm still trying to get a handle on what all this means, but it's very concerning. It's really an effort to identify more places to build. And I think there's a number of concerns that need to be considered with this process. So right now I'm trying to find out more about it. And I just thought I'd put it out there to the committee, the board of directors, so that everybody is aware of what this process is.
Anybody else have it?
I'm sorry? Okay.
Just an observation, I first started on this planning commission as the representative of the bird. Started in 1989, a long time ago. During that my early term here, and I now represent Palace. The law was passed called Act 200. It's a lot of controversy, but in the end, it was about statewide planning. It's supposed to fill the gap that was left when they passed Act 250, statewide Act 250. Seem to be going on that now, but in a very different way than was anticipated under Act 200. Act 200 anticipated and required a bottom-up process that municipal planning would feed into regional planning, feed into state planning. That's how we would divide that. Kind of the state plan architecture, how the regulatory Act 250 would oversee development and protection of the state resources, ag land, forest land, and downtowns. Well, it seemed like Act 200 stood on its head. But it seems right now, Surprised following this, but it's fine that radar is absolute top down process, absolute personal state policy historically, and really that we follow up until now has been what's was mapped out. Well, let's add to changes. But I share some aspects.
So just a little bit of pushback on that, John. I don't disagree with you on the tier, particularly the tier 3 aspect, but I think large parts of our maps are being built from the ground up as I incorporate the zoning and state designations and utilities and things like that. It's these, I don't know, overlays, particularly this tier 3 overlay that seems to be described as one thing and maybe playing out as something entirely different, or at least partially different. And I do have some concerns about that. I think the regional plan committee will probably talk more about this at their next meeting. And Alex Weinhagen, who is tasked with developing the tier 3 designation, is taking comments. I can provide you with contact information if the board wants to dig into this a little bit more and have staff prepare a draft memo or feedback to the land use review board. We'd be happy to do that as well. I think all those options are on the table. I don't necessarily know we should wait for the tier 3 map to come out. I think expressing your concerns at this point would hopefully influence the process and again yield a better outcome.
I follow. Right. Yeah, so Brian, and I understand that the CVRPC is attempting to work the bottom still, but is that matter of choosing by the CVRPC? Does the law that's on post now authorize planning commission if they choose otherwise to mandate? Now in 2000, I've heard that in another region that staff of that regional planning commission or board members, executive, either that. They have that authority to take to towns. So on this.
In my alternate universe, I definitely grab that authority and run with it, but I don't think that's the way it's playing out.
Okay. You can say it like.
I mean, I don't need you to name names now, but I would be curious, maybe to talk to you more about that, because I might, we meet, the regional planning commissions meet, there's sort of 2 different groups meeting about these future land use maps. There's sort of the more policy side and the next to mapping side. So I attend most of those meetings, and it does not strike me that other regions are taking a top-down approach. It might be the way that they're conveying the draft maps to the municipalities when they go out for visits. I don't know, I can't speak.
Yeah,
I just don't.
The case that's brought to my attention, staff developed maps and board has essentially said it, those are the maps of the towns into virtual. So I don't know.
I just want to,
Somebody said.
yeah, again, so all running wrong. I won't speak for other regions,
Yeah.
one way or the other. But I will speak that this was, this state actor, state hold it and say that they don't have to opt with the tier page. They have to apply for tier 1A.
They have to.
Yeah, tier 1A is an application process.
This college though.
They want to,
Oh, they want.
If they want,
Okay,
yeah,
okay, sorry.
They don't fall into it.
Yeah, right.
If they want, I was for an application. Tier 1B, they don't opt in, doesn't question. So there's, I wouldn't say it's, he gives them the ability, he's on the active side of things to say, no, we're not ready for this. We want to think about our, because we know we don't have, say, the internal controls to handle the project lawsuit, something, we got that states. So there is still that pull.
Yeah, O'Brien, at the start, you mentioned that you'd like to have a combined, select board planning commission meeting. I would encourage you to do that. No municipalities. That way everybody's on the same page, have the same thoughts, have the same back and forth. And it makes it easier than for the planning commission to operate. They have that interaction with regional planning committee and select board, so. Whatever you can do it, and I think you can rely on, at least speaking for myself, if you need somebody to coordinate it at the local level, I think that will sure the members here will be glad to do it also. So use this as a resource.
I will, thanks, lady.
You go to 23 towns.
Thanks for volunteering yourself in
26 minutes. Yeah, Alice, yeah.
Yeah, I did. One other thing I wanted to say about what was spoken at that meeting is that the Land Use Review Board is looking to allow development above 2,500 feet, which is, so that it would wind up bypassing whatever the municipalities have for zoning, and what the municipalities have for allowing development at certain elevations in their own zoning laws. I know if they do this for tier 3, Waitsfield, that would affect Waitsfield's zoning laws about the elevation of where you can build. And I did put 2 links in the chat. One is gives you the whole land use review board process for tier 3 and the schedules of all their summer invitation only review meetings, and some are full public hearings, but the schedule is in there and what they have for input. And the second one is the report that the Land Use Review Board wrote about the public hearing at Essex that myself and Doug were at. And I would say, yeah, it's a good review of it. I don't think you get the flavor of the emotions in it as we did at the public hearing, and they did not record it. They're not recording their meetings. But those two links are in there, and I encourage you to read them.
I want to respond.
Just maybe clarification, Alex brought up that tier 3. The LRD is going to allow development of that would be just clarification. My understanding of Act 250 historically and this information that's gone around about Act 250 is that Act 250 disallows development above 200 feet. Historically has disallowed that. That is actually not true. 25-foot elevation designation is a trigger for Act 250 jurisdiction. So any development, you don't have to have 10 lots at 2,500 feet or above. Historically, it's the fact that you have development 2 lots subdivision, for instance, at or above 2,500 feet would trigger Act 250 for equipment. Denied. So I don't know if that's what they meant, Alice. If they're going to continue along that same trajectory, or if this is something new that they want to see more development at elevation, which I'm kind of struggling to believe, but I wasn't there, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting out there what I heard, and Doug Greason and I reviewed together what we heard. So, but I'm not stopping here. I'm looking to get more clarification and information on, well, actually what Act 181 did to modify, Act 250. So, yes, I agree with you, but I'm trying to understand now what the changes really are with, Act 250, with the passage of Act 181, which was meant to make the Act 250 process, I want to say easier, but yeah, that's probably the word. But it just sounds to me like the Land Use Review Board has a lot of leeway and authority about how they can define Tier 3. And the point is to allow building. And I also pointed out at the meeting, as we have this experience here in Waitsfield, that if you're building at these higher elevations, you're really risking flooding, new flooding that can happen.
I just get that meeting upset and ability to make sure that I haven't seen the first draft. I didn't think it would be quite that early, but that'd be nice if they did. Yeah, that's what I think I heard. They made it up with that. But I think, I guess my point is that we're gonna be seeing the draft in the near term. That's gonna get to office, so we have to be ready for any comment. Because that's our opportunity, said, this is my. That should be coming along. Yeah, and part of that process, they are tasked with coordinating with other state agencies. And while I do share a lot of Alice's concerns and other concerns that have been voiced, I have a hard time believing the Agency of Natural Resources is gonna lay down on, critically wildlife corridors and interior forest blocks and other things that, they've worked so hard, they all worked hard to protect over the years. So, cautiously optimistic, might still be more optimistic than I am, but we do need to be ready to review it, and looking at the materials that exist now should be a priority for folks, and then the board can talk about at what level they want to offer input either now or once the preliminary draft was out.
One more question for you, Brian. We're gonna shut the door. I only need 30 seconds. Go ahead. Brian. Does the work that the LURB developed and put into play, after it was finalized, adopted, does that then transcribe to the Public Utility Commission as far as they look at criteria for Act 250 and kind of the review of utility projects? They adopting any of the where it meets planning or any of that process, and
Your answer for that, Will, or?
I'm aware of it. I see a third negative, but I see.
Well, we can look into that more.
A couple of things. We talk about the land use maps and that. When I was hearing about this obviously for a while. A couple of things. One is, do we ever look at, before they had zoning and all that sort of stuff, do we ever look at why land was used the way it was before? That may have something to do with what you can do with it now or can't. Obviously, I can do it. Why they had zoning regulations, why did they use that land that way? That may also have, maybe they used that land that way because that was the most logical way to use it. Maybe it's still the most logical way to use it. So as you look at the past history of where the development was, not just where it's going to go, but where it was and why. So that's one point. Second point is, I think the geology with the main, and I hear all this discussion. I know we talk about floodplains and all that, but very little about the underlying geology. Right? You thought it was the you can't build this in it, I know, but in other places, And the soil of the bedrock, so obviously has an effect on land use. And when you're making a land use map, you're not necessarily making these rules in my mind based on the, with any consideration of underlying physical structure of the land. I may be wrong in that, but it seems that I did. Look at density and all that, but let's get some real, why is the land that may have to zone land that way, because that's the only way it makes sense to use the physical, geological. I think we should put more effort in actually doing the physical characteristics of the land, besides just the population or the soil, but the bedrock and the soil, groundwater. And that has to have an effect on land use. Right now, a lot of land use, well, we should, we can put it for a shopping center here, we need a school or whatever. But I see very little, why, in the past, did they do that? Was it because they didn't want to, because they didn't consult, well, what's not practical? And I think we have to look at why the land use in the past developed the way. We're not past, still has an effect in what, why it developed the past was the way they built the land. Really makes sense to use about it, so we should really take that into more account into the land use, says just, right now, we population density economic. But I still have some very little about the actual physical characteristics of the land. Other than maybe 2,500 women, elevation, but that's. So.
Yeah, the only place that really plays into this, Ron, is for areas outside of wastewater service. We look at soils to see if they're capable of accepting additional. Septic, yeah, so like pretty minimal look.
Yeah, but I think it should be and nowadays, as much as everyone may hate to say this, use the term, all of a sudden, they may look into the future, all of a sudden, resources that were not, didn't make sense to mine in the past are now all of a sudden valuable. I'll give you an example. Jersey, of course, there's also, I'm wishing Jersey, all sorts of land use and development and everything else, urban, and rural, and but one of the pros in the, I know in the Jersey geological survey, all of a sudden, what years ago they didn't pay any attention to was waste. Now they find some of that waste, a lot of that waste, quote unquote, waste rock of all of a sudden has rare earths. All right. And now I knew years ago, that was waste. Well, this should be known because you may be stuck with some land use and with a resource you must have. Where, what minerals that you have in detail. Where, and I think this should be at least investigated, if not depth, at least, as a preliminary survey, what is there and maybe and you may have to, let's say, I can position people with rare earth mines here in, let's say, of course, the Hudson River in New Jersey, also they have to mine the shallow settings because that's where the rare earths are, which we don't want China to dominate. So these are things that should be at least looked at. I don't know how but you are pointed how you land use writing legally this way. But I think it should be looked at. And I don't see it looked at that much personally.
Thank you, Ron, appreciate you. But anyone else have any comments or questions, want to address them? All right.
Just a quick one, Jerry. I'm thinking back to various cities map That should protect us or that shanty goes on. But, our floodplain's taken into account on any of these as far as where the development should occur.
Yes, so, floodplains and river corridors are both, and it depends on the zoning of the municipality, so if. So the idea would be they can stay in these higher density classes if there is. Municipal zoning that specifically addresses the flooding hazard and meets the minimum standard of the, flood hazard, bylaws, the state minimum standard. And so ideally, those would be for locations that could be either redeveloped or receive infill development. If that's not the case, or if there's not existing development in those areas, then they should not be included in the higher density classes. And I believe in the latest iteration of the methodology, there's some talk of essentially a floodplain corridor overlay of sorts that would then potentially dampen any relaxation on density or requirements.
Section, I'm just concerned now, just thinking of some of our towns in the area, beautiful main streets with the river right next to it. We can just wait or over it, we've done years. That's why I was thinking on there.
That's a good one. Then you've got very interested in moving on, if anyone has any other comments, please address them. You, right? The email. Okay, next item on the agenda is the minutes. Get a motion. I'll second. Motion by Lee, second by Rich, all those in favor, any offers, any questions, any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Any, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Next item is reports, and before we have commission staff, I just want to point out the page 11, one of the skateboard project. You can place which have made donations. In memory of Steve Locke, which, and I love the way they make the memory, the kind of Steve Locke is a hero. And he was, all time member of the Swain, and he was community here in Vermont. It was over 30 years, he was very, just remember, like we have this, they put it, what makes them very good.
Sure, I'll point out everything from the meeting minutes, obviously, there's a lot in there. I think underlying our staff and committee reports are a couple themes. One is around staff and how our staff has grown in their position and coming in with adjacent, back as an adjacent field for the growing the role of planners. And their growth has allowed us to really expand services pretty often, or depth to go into the municipalities. And then it sure shows itself throughout a couple of programs that have also grown significantly in the last few years. The clean water service provider, it really feels like it's stood up at this point. The project's coming in and going out. The municipal energy resilience program, went through the application process in the last year. And all the work that was done there, getting town access to that funding for building updates. And finally, the roundtable program, obviously, just got a big shot in our but savings to those programs are growing and obviously the work goes with it. And all this is being done in the backdrop of constantly changing legislative requirements, whether at draft 180 a month or 121 that really did involve budget research to make us a resource for our municipalities. So want to kind of take a 30,000 foot view of what is involved there to build work and staff things.
Any comments or questions from the staff on the report?
I make the shout out, probably, I was gonna guess it's to Nancy, just for all your hard work, Nancy. Yeah, you, and
Yeah.
if you're the one who did the food ordering, thank you, this is a really fabulous.
That's for the next item on the.
Oh, sorry.
And we'll come back to you, this is for the staff reports.
I'll make the motion, I accept the staff report, second.
The motion on the floor, accept the staff reports, all those in favor? Yeah. All those opposed? Any, there, none, voting passes. The next one, all that is the commissioner roundtable. You have the floor.
You didn't say anything about gratitude there, it's a round table. Well, I already said it, but thank you, this was a lovely event, everyone planned it, this has been really nice, I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of them. It's a joint effort always. Sorry. Joint effort always. Good. Continue. Yeah.
Any other comments on how the government commission on roundtable? Anything you'd like to discuss, and anyone you want to thank, you anyone you want to. All right. Okay, here this is my last speech. Well, go ahead.
Just one more comment, I brought this up in town, the study of the traffic around, can't meet a crossing, they want crossing, across Route 2. I brought that up and looking at it again, I went back and looked at it more carefully and thought I would have, it's a very bad, it's a bad history. And, near where they want to cross it, it's a high don't vision, being really safe, especially, you drive that Route 2 right before Camden, between Middlesex and off the Camden, it goes through a couple of bad estimates where there's almost no visibility. So I think any crosswalks, there has to be looked at very, very carefully. Because I hate to be sarcastic, but I know everyone in Bay has seen it around us. The food, so, it should be a very hit. And I mentioned to Cal committee, and they were doing a study, but I think we should be very careful about your work in that area, Route 2, because the visibility coming into that section of the fence, they can't be very wide in the Route 2. We'll see it. If you're almost above that's the rest of it.
Any other? Going back, since this is my last speech as the chair. Pastor Gatto. Peter.
Yes. Very honestly, thank you all very much for voting for me this year, next 2-year period. I'm going to enjoy to be along with you the vice chair and Janet as our secretary treasurer. But yeah, let's do one good round for this gentleman who is guided with the plan.
Now a motion to adjourn?
I second that, Don.
I'll send my appreciation to the staff. Especially each one of them, on a monthly basis. Especially Nancy, who's been a big, I think everyone will well aware. When she decides to retire, big boss. But nowadays, I get putting up with being my quickness. In short, thank you.
John, I'm waiting.
Wait a minute.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we need a little insurrection here, so I can very much to the chair.
Okay, I just want to say, I was gonna debate here one my motion out of order. I'm wait till the next chair takes hold, and then I'm gonna bring it up again. That was in order, but it was smooth.
John, we're waiting.
Motion to adjourn.
Got it?
Please second.
Motion, meeting is closed. Thank you all very much.